about cars, cardiologists, and cannellini beans. Do you have cannellini beans here in New Zealand? All right, that's good. But before we start, I want to say another quick word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, I am so thankful that you have created what we need to be healthy. Thank you for these gifts, and thank you for this bit of understanding of how these bodies that you've graciously given us work. Help us to be good stewards of the health that you've given us and to live our lives fully for you. In the name of Jesus we pray, amen. Cars, cardiologists, and cannellini beans. So I want you to meet somebody. Meet Dr. Teeters. Dr. Teeters is Chief of Cardiology at Highland Hospital. Dr. Teeters, weight, 315 pounds. Favorite food, smoked meat. Activity level, well, he was formerly very active, but his weight's kind of slowing him down now. Blood pressure, very high, 173 systolic. Borderline diabetic. He's tried Weight Watchers, he's tried Jenny Craig, he's tried all the weight loss programs. Maybe not all of them, but several, no success. Dr. Teeters was invited by one of his colleagues at the hospital that he works at. Highland Hospital is a hospital in the US, pretty well-known hospital. So he was invited by one of his colleagues to participate in a 6-week whole food, plant-based diet introductory program. Dr. Teeters, no way. The vegetarian stuff is what weird people do. We ended up going anyway, but I think maybe perhaps to kind of show them that they were wrong. I mean, he was a cardiologist and he knew better. He was a wholehearted skeptic, this is according to him, who wanted to prove that this was not all it was cracked up to be. But about 1 week into the program, and Dr. Teeters was hooked. I felt so good, he said. How could I go back? So to date, and this is a very new story, so this is still in progress. To date, Dr. Teeters has lost 90 pounds. His blood pressure is now normal and down like, I think 115 systolic, so he's down like about 60 points. And again, he feels wonderful. He's not going back, no intention of going back. I felt dramatically better, he said. So realizing that he didn't get nutrition education in medical school, Dr. Teeters went back to school. He picked up a few books and started studying on his own. And he discovered that with the most optimal medical management plan, doctors could achieve a 27, 28, 29% reduction in the risk for heart attack and stroke. But he discovered with a plant-based diet, his patients could experience a 70 to 73% reduction in risk for heart attack and stroke, but not just for heart attack and stroke, but for many other diseases as well. Arthritis, Alzheimer's, diabetes, many, many other diseases could be reduced by a plant-based diet. Dr. Teeters was interested. He was impressed. He was a doctor. It was his job to help patients, and he finally felt like he actually could. Dr. Teeters, quote, "I was impressed by the data that showed, bar none, the plant-based diet was better than anything we have to offer for cardiovascular risk reduction." Now, anecdotes aside, there's significant scientific evidence that shows that the most innovative and successful disease treatment and prevention tools, 2 of them, are spoon and our fork. For example, research shows that eating 1 cup of oatmeal per day extends a woman's life by as much as jogging 4 hours a week. And if you ask my personal opinion, a whole lot more enjoyable. A cup of berries will do the exact same thing, and this bean salad will too. Other research shows that consuming the amount of cholesterol that's in one egg per day, every day, consuming that much cholesterol every day, cuts a woman's life short by as much as smoking 5 cigarettes a day for 15 years. What we put on our plate really does impact our health. Each month, around 860 people in New Zealand die from cardiovascular disease. This is the equivalent to an Airbus A380 plane crashing in New Zealand every single month. You'd hear about that on the news, wouldn't you? So how many of you wear a seatbelt? Well, maybe I'm assuming it's probably against the law in New Zealand to not wear a seatbelt. So if there were no law, how many of you would wear a seatbelt anyway? Pretty much most of you. Why? Why would you wear a seatbelt? Right, saves your life. It could save your life. It reduces your risk of dying if you're in a road traffic accident, which, by the way, is 1 in 85 over the course of 50 years. Your risk of dying in a road traffic accident in your driving career of 50 years is 1 in 85. So we want to wear a seatbelt because we reduce that risk of dying. But compare this to your risk of dying of heart disease. 1 in 3. This is tragic. And this is expensive. But this is really sad. But we have a seatbelt for this disease. We need to put it on. So here's the seatbelt. And I couldn't find statistics for the New Zealanders. But I'm guessing it's very much the same because many of our other statistics were the same. The average US male has a 50-50 risk of dying of heart disease if he eats the average American diet. Our diet's not that great. And it, again, looks pretty similar to yours. We eat a little bit more sugar than you do, but otherwise pretty much similar. But what happens if you take away this average American's diet and you take away fish and chicken, meat? Still has dairy products and eggs and so forth. Now his risk of dying of heart disease goes down to 15%. That's huge. Go plant-based, and the risk goes down to 4%. Let's put that seatbelt on. Heart disease isn't the only problem that a plate of potatoes can prevent. Cancer, research shows that those who eat a plant-based diet experience much lower risk of dying of cancer than both meat eaters and vegetarians. And by vegetarians, I mean those who don't eat meat but still eat milk and eggs, dairy products and eggs. Much lower risk among those on a plant-based diet. In one study that compared women on a plant-based diet with women on a healthy diet that included meat. So we're not talking junk food, we're talking a really healthy diet, but it does include meat only 2 times a week. And we find that those on the plant-based diet reduce their risk by 34%. They have 34% reduced risk of cancer. And this was even after controlling for other factors like family history and smoking and alcohol and so forth. So a plant-based diet is very powerful in reducing disease. So why does this happen? I mean, how does this work? So this is really fascinating. They've done studies where they take cancer cells in petri dishes and then they take blood from people who eat a meat-based diet and blood from those who eat a plant-based diet, and they drop the blood into these petri dishes full of cancer cells. And then they just sit back and watch the blood do its thing. And a standard diet slows cancer growth by about 9%. But the plant-based diet slows cancer cells growth by 70%. Amazing. Eat some cannellini beans and your blood becomes a cancer-fighting machine. So diabetes is another disease that's caused by what we put on our plates. A number of studies have shown that those eating a meat-based diet are at a much greater risk for developing diabetes than those who eat a plant-based diet. So those who eat meat less than once a week have a chance of getting diabetes, but the more meat you eat, the greater your risk of getting diabetes. This is interesting to me, though, because those who ate meat less than once, in this study, those who ate meat less than once a week actually lived a lot longer than those who ate it 3, 4, 6 times a week. The longer you live, the greater chance you have of developing disease, simply because you're living longer. And yet still, they had a much lower risk of developing diabetes than those who ate it more than 3, 4, 6 times a week. Another study looking at 89,000 people, and we see a stepwise drop in the rates of diabetes until you get to the totally plant-based diet, and there's a 78% lower prevalence among those eating a plant-based diet of diabetes. But even vegans plant-based diets don't necessarily have to be healthy. Even vegans don't always eat healthy. I mean, Oreos are vegan, Diet Coke is vegan, some of the substitute meats are vegan. They would fall into the same category as these. Some of the condiments that vegans typically use, none of these are really health food, but a lot of vegans eat these. And so researchers and a lot of the studies that are done include these junk food vegans. So researchers were really curious, what would happen if we did a study that didn't include the junk food vegans? What if we did a study among people where those who were on a plant-based diet were eating a healthy plant-based diet, but where do we find those people? Well, they went to Taiwan, and they did a study among Buddhists. The Buddhists were eating a traditional Asian diet, which included very little meat, but it didn't include the fake meats or the soda pop or the cookies and candies and so forth that are vegan. So they're fairly healthy diet. Even those who ate meat ate very little meat. No Oreos, though. And this is what they found. Researchers compared those eating a healthy diet with, again, it had meat, but it was very little meat, with those eating a vegetarian diet. So they had dairy products and eggs in their diet, and those eating no meat had a much lower risk of diabetes. Now, what about those on the whole food plant-based diet? 0 of them developed diabetes. Obesity, because there's no junk food involved. Obesity, this is my area of work. I'm a weight loss coach, and a lot of times when people first come to me, one of the first things they say is, I already know my problem. I just don't get enough exercise. Well, is it really a matter of putting out more calories than you take in, or does the kind of food that we eat matter? Well, in my experience, I do try to encourage my clients to go as plant-based as possible, but some clients come to me eating hamburgers and pizza 3 meals a day, and so I just, move them in the as long as they're moving in a positive direction, they're going to lose weight, even if they don't go perfectly plant-based. But those who are willing to go plant-based, in my experience, I have found that they can eat as many calories as they want, and they will still, by moving to a plant-based diet, lose 6 pounds within 5 to 6 pounds a week without going hungry, without counting carbs, without counting calories. So it's very, very helpful. I really encourage people not to count calories because you really need enough calories to function. It's not the calories, it's the type of food that you're eating. Studies show that people groups who don't struggle with obesity eat about 80% of their calories from complex carbohydrates. You get complex carbohydrates from foods like fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans. These foods are whole foods and they're plant-based and they're super helpful for weight loss. Here's something interesting. There was a study done where individuals were divided into 2 groups. One group was placed on a high-carb diet, and one group was placed on a low-carb diet. And they found that those on the high-carb diet actually ended up losing weight, even though, on average, they were eating 30% more calories than those on the low-carb diet. More calories, they still lost weight. In fact, their body weight was 20% lower than those in the low-carb, high-protein group. So complex carbohydrates, they are just super helpful for weight loss. They are the way to go if you want to lose weight. Whole plant-based foods are super rich in nutrients, so they're going to energize your body, give your body what they need. And they contain a number of other benefits, like they boost serotonin levels. They provide energy for your red blood cells. In fact, they're the only source of energy for your red blood cells. They're also good for the heart. They give you energy. They have a higher satiety level. They've done a lot of studies on satiety levels for different types of food. I mean, they've tested a number of foods, and consistently, the whole plant foods are at the top of the list every single time. Potatoes are usually number one. So what does high satiety mean? That means that if you eat a breakfast that is high, it is high in satiety, you're going to have less of a desire to eat. You're going to desire less food later. You're going to have less of a desire to snack and so forth later. You're going to be more satisfied with your food. And consistently, whole plant-based foods have higher satiety levels. They're also the best source of phytochemicals and antioxidants, which have been shown to be super disease fighters. And they're needed for proper functioning of the nervous system. In fact, carbohydrates are the main source of energy actually the only source of energy for your brain. If you cut back on carbs, complex carbohydrates, you cut back on the fuel for your brain. While it is true that every body is different, I can tell you that your body wants to be at a healthy weight. God did not design your body to carry a lot of extra weight. And if you cooperate with your body, eating the foods that God has intended you to eat, it's going to gravitate, it's going to move toward a healthier weight without counting carbohydrates and without counting calories. It's interesting that the problem with foods like the animal products like meat and cheese and eggs, fish, and so forth, and oil and sugar fall into this category as well. It isn't just that they pack a lot of calories into these particular foods. It's that they alter the biochemistry of the body, in that affects the way fat is stored and the way fat is expended. So it kind of like tilts your body toward fat storage, eating these foods. So that's why the people who are eating more calories can eat more calories and still lose weight. So this means that someone on a plant-based diet can eat a big plate of pasta, 800 calories worth of pasta, and not gain weight, while somebody on a meat-based diet, non-plant-based diet, can eat a little 500-calorie plate of broiled chicken or macaroni and cheese or what have you, and still gain weight. It's because the body, it has to do with insulin signaling, and it affects the way that the body stores fat. So the problem isn't the number of calories that you take in. Rather, it's the biochemical influences of these foods on your left side, the way that they affect the way that your body stores fat. So how do we avoid these foods? Because they're actually hidden a lot of places, especially sugar and oil. It's pretty obvious if something has meat in it, usually. But sugar and oil are hidden in a lot of places. So how do we avoid getting these foods? Well, the first thing to do is to shop the produce section, because as yet, I have not seen them hide sugar in a bunch of broccoli or in kale leaves. So it's probably coming, but right now you're safe. So shop the produce section. Load up on fresh fruits and vegetables. You can eat these foods in abundance, and you don't have to worry about gaining weight at all with these foods. Cucumbers, kale, potatoes, sweet potatoes, all the fruit that you want, no problem. Then for the other foods that come in packages, the next step, strategy that you want to use to avoid these foods that contribute to obesity and disease is to read the label, but not the front label, the ingredient label. Read the ingredient label. The front label can say a lot of things that you don't necessarily want to trust, like words like 100% natural, made with real fruit, or here's my favorite, oh wait, no artificial ingredients, this next one is my favorite, now with kale added. Like that's gonna make something horribly unhealthy better. Light, sugar-free, high fiber, high protein, super grains. What's a super grain? I mean, all grains are super, I like all of them. Healthy, organic, and here's the most deceptive one. Unrefined. You see this on a lot of front labels of foods that are refined. Don't believe this one. Take the box or the package or whatever and do a little wrist exercises and look at the ingredient label. See what's actually in the food that you're eating. Read all of the ingredients so you know what you're eating. And then if you do decide to eat something that's not so great for you, at least you know what you're doing. But read the ingredient label. It's going to tell you what is in that food. And you want to, as much as possible, avoid the animal products, avoid the sugar, avoid the oil, because these, if you're trying to lose weight and avoid disease, because these are very contributive to diseases. Read the ingredient label. And if you're not concerned about weight loss, which I hope that if you're overweight you are, we really should be concerned about it for our children. 1 in 8 children in New Zealand are obese, and that's just setting them up for disease and difficulties later in life. So let's be good examples to the children around us. And a lot of times I hear parents or other people who are in the place of parents say, you know, I don't want to deprive my child of that. You know, I want their childhood to be happy. It's just a brownie, it's just a cookie or something like that. But by depriving them, are we really depriving them? We're really keeping them from lifelong bad habits, lifelong disease. So talk to your children. Children are intelligent, and they can understand that you're only wanting what's best for them, and that by feeding them a healthy diet, you're trying to make their life happy, just like God is for us. So if you eat a plant-based diet, you may be thin, and you're not going to die from heart disease or cancer, or you're less likely to die from heart disease or cancer or diabetes, but you're going to be absolutely miserable because all you can eat is rice and broccoli and salad, right? Well, not really. First, there's a lot more to eat than rice and broccoli and salad. But secondly, plant foods not only keep you healthy and help you avoid disease, but research has also shown that plant foods help make us happier too. They have done research, and they've shown that the patience level, not doctors' kind of patience, but our kind of patience, like not getting frustrated kind of patience, levels are much higher in those who eat a plant-based diet. Amazing. So studies also show that the more meat, milk, cheese, and eggs eaten, the lower the happiness score. Why is this? Well, meat, milk, eggs, and cheese have something in them called arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid causes inflammation, and this inflammation is what makes us irritable. The foods that are very highest in arachidonic acid are oil, chicken, beef, eggs, and I think sausage is in there too, and fish. These are highest in arachidonic acid. So if you do eat these foods, try to at least avoid these particular ones if you want to not be grumpy. Another study found that diets that were high in trans fats caused a 42% increase in depression among the participants of the diet. So trans fats are found in margarine and some oils and shortening and foods that are made with them. And most fast foods like Kentucky Fried Chicken, which I think is amazing that you guys have here. I used to live in Kentucky in the United States, and you have it all the way over here. Anyway, foods like that, fried foods and so forth, are often high in trans fats. And processed foods don't really offer us any benefit anyway. So besides avoiding heart disease and diabetes and obesity, eating a healthy whole food diet is just the smart way to eat. Our brains create a major nutrition pull on our body. They use a lot of the nutrition that we take in order to function optimally. So does anybody know what the best fuel for the brain is? What fuel does the brain use? I think I heard it. Your brain is an incredibly picky eater. You think your child is picky. Your brain will only eat one thing, only one thing, glucose. Exactly. The only fuel that your brain can use is glucose, except in extreme situations like starvation or something like that, which hopefully we're not experiencing. So glucose, but where does the glucose come from? It comes from whole plant-based foods. So if the optimal nutrient for our brains is glucose, then that means we could eat a lot of donuts to really give our brains a good glucose boost, right? Actually, it's kind of ironic because high glucose levels are actually dangerous, damaging to the brain. So how do you give your brain glucose, the fuel that it needs, without giving it too much glucose? Well, once again, the answer is complex carbohydrates, because complex carbohydrates are broken down very slowly by the body, and so they're released because of all the fiber in it, for one thing, but a few other reasons. And so they're released very slowly, and so the brain gets this steady stream of the exact fuel it needs, glucose. Perfect. Isn't it amazing that the food that God gave us is the perfect fuel for our brain? What a coincidence. Not really. So we see that a plant-based diet is wonderfully helpful to prevent disease, and it also keeps our brain functioning well. But where do genetics fall into this story? We can do all these things to prevent disease, but if genetically we're predisposed to cancer, we're probably going to die of cancer. Yes? No? If genetically we're predisposed to heart disease, that's probably that's what we're born with. That's what we're stuck with. That's our blueprint. Actually, not necessarily. Research shows that what you eat actually can change the way our genes express themselves. So it changes, well, let me give you an example. Let's suppose that we're in this room and there are no windows, or at least the blinds are closed in this room, and there are 50 light bulbs across the top of the room. And we turn these lights on. What's it going to be like in here? It's going to be very light, very bright in here. Now let's suppose, again, the blinds are closed and we turn all those lights off. What's it going to be like in here? Dark. Just because we have the light bulbs in here doesn't mean it's going to be light in here, correct? What do we have to do for it to be light in here? We have to turn the lights on, and that's the way that these genes work. We may have a gene for diabetes, but unless that gene is turned on, we probably won't get diabetes. We may have a gene for heart disease, but unless that gene gets turned on, we may not get the disease. We're less likely to get the disease. So the genes need to be turned on. Okay, so this is what's amazing. How do these genes get turned on? Epigenetic modifications, also called tags, are like little switches on your genes, and these switches provide the instruction of whether these genes should be turned on or not. So here's where it gets really interesting. We have about 4 million of these little switches on our genes, and they're triggered by, get this, what you ate for lunch today and other lifestyle factors. We have control over whether some of these genes for disease get switched on or not, and we also have control over whether some of the genes that help prevent disease get turned on or not. Amazing stuff. It's absolutely amazing to think that we have that much control over what goes on inside of our body. Studies show that plant-based diet can cause more than 500 genes to change how they express themselves in guess how long? By switching to a plant-based diet, it only takes 3 months for this to happen. 3 months and your genes start changing, whether they're turned on or how they're expressing themselves. Amazing stuff. So what about this? I hear this a lot. Everything in moderation. If I had $1 for every time I heard this, I would be quite wealthy. Everything in moderation is perhaps the most famous dietary advice ever given, and the most dangerous. Now, there are places where moderation should exist. For example, breathing. If you hold your breath too long, you wouldn't last very long. You'd probably not feel very well. If you breathe too much, what happens? You hyperventilate. You need moderation in breathing. You need to breathe just the right amount. Another example, sunshine. If you don't get enough, you don't get enough vitamin D. If you get too much sunshine, you're going to get sunburn. So there are places where moderation is something that we need to put in place. But everything in moderation does not work in all situations. Cocaine in moderation is not a good idea. Smoking cigarettes. You cannot smoke cigarettes in moderation and be healthy. Playing with fire in moderation is playing with fire. You can't do certain things in moderation and still be safe or healthy. And it turns out that everything in moderation when it comes to diet is not wise advice either. Regardless of what we want to think, it is absolutely true that there are some foods that are harmful to eat even in moderation. Tests show that just one meal that is high in meat or cheese causes injury to the blood vessels, to the inside of the inner lining of the blood vessels. Just one meal, it causes damage and it causes inflammation. Caffeine, even a small amount of caffeine, alters blood flow to the brain. So moderation does not work for all things. Here's something really interesting. In the 1940s, 3/4 of all New Zealanders smoked, and about 1/3 of women smoked. And I'm not picking on New Zealanders because we were doing the exact same thing. Was this because we didn't know any better? Actually, no, not true. For years and years, we had already had the research that showed that smoking was very damaging. Smoking was harmful. But most of this research was ignored. Why? Because everybody did it. Nearly everybody smoked. And nobody wanted to tell everybody that it was a bad idea, probably because they were doing it themselves. We kind of just get used to what everybody else is doing. Even if we know it's harmful, we just kind of, brush it off. Interestingly, rather than warning people, we've got this research, but rather than warning people against smoking in America, the American Medical Association in America was reassuring people that smoking in moderation is healthy. Shame. In New Zealand, the Department of Health stated, tobacco has its uses. It's used to relieve tension and help relaxation. Then they talk about moderation. What about moderation? What is moderation for smoking? Limit yourself to 6 or 8 cigarettes a day. This is absurd. This sounds absolutely absurd to us, but think about it. We are doing the exact same thing today in diet. We have had research for decades showing us that just about anything except for healthy, whole, plant-based food causes disease. I'm generalizing a bit here, but we have had this research for decades. And yet the experts are still warning us, or just not warning us. They're still reassuring us that just eat it in moderation. So I think that we need to think about it. We think about how absurd the smoking is. the lack of warning against smoking, but I think we need to realize that that is what we're doing with the diet as well. Nearly everybody is eating this way, and so we just kind of think it's normal. Again, this is not because we didn't have the research. There had been research for decades, but they were still saying that smoking in moderation is healthy. This is interesting. This is Caldwell Esselstyn. He was a famous cardiologist in the United States. He's also a former Olympic rowing champion. And this is what he says about moderation. In cholesterol lowering, moderation kills. And our friend, the cardiologist, he says, I used to tell people that moderation is key. Now I realize that for years I had not been giving people good advice. Diseases that we commonly see in our society are like raging fires, and the unhealthy food that we eat is like fuel for that fire. If we moderate that unhealthy food, are we putting that fire out? No, we're just feeding it a little less, but that fire is still going to burn. Okay, I want you to remember this number, 200. Many physicians and other experts recommend moderation in diet to keep your cholesterol level under 200. So remember that number. 1 in 3 people in New Zealand die from heart disease, similar to the US. Interestingly, 40% of these people who died had cholesterol levels under 200. What was the number that physicians and experts were recommending? 200. But 40% of the people who are dying from heart disease have cholesterol levels under 200. Moderation doesn't give these people their life back. Recommending moderate changes in diet and getting your cholesterol level down to 200 guarantees that millions are still going to die from heart disease. So when people realize this and they say, forget this silly moderation idea, and they switch to a whole food plant-based diet, remove the unhealthy food that is causing heart disease, we see cholesterol levels come down, not to 200, but to 120, to 110, to 100, with LDL, the bad cholesterol, down to 67, 66. And heart disease is not only prevented, but heart disease is reversed. And we have almost 0 people dying from heart disease just by switching to a healthy plant-based diet. This is the only wise course. Moderation is not good advice. Here's another reason why moderation doesn't work. A study done at the University of Georgia posed the question, how do people define moderation? Well, interestingly, the answer seems to be however they jolly well please. So take individuals whose favorite snack or treat are potato chips. And you ask them, what's a moderate amount of cookies to eat in a week? And you get the average, an answer of an average of about one cookie a week. That's what they think is a moderate amount. Now, what if you take a person whose favorite treat is cookies? You ask them, what's a moderate amount of cookies to eat in a week? You get an answer of about 5 or 6. This is not we are not good definers of what is healthy in moderation. In fact, moderation, most people seem to define moderation as allowing unhealthful foods into the diet and calling it healthy because they're not eating as much of them as they really would like to eat. Not good advice. So here's another example. If our car's owner's manual says diesel only, this is a diesel car, put diesel in it. Do we put just a little bit of gasoline in it and say everything in moderation? No, we know that, and trust, well, maybe I shouldn't say, I know this from experience. It's not a good idea. Moderation doesn't work for our vehicles, and it really doesn't work for us either. But why do we treat our cars better than we treat our bodies? I mean, when that dash light goes on, we take care of it right away. When the oil needs changed, we take, or at least most of us, take care of it right away. We take good care of our vehicles. We would never think of putting something into our fuel tank that didn't belong there. Did you hear me? We would never think of putting something into our fuel tank that didn't belong there because our cars are valuable. But you can always buy a new car. You can never buy another you. In contrast, every year, millions of people die from diseases that could have been prevented with a little bit of regular maintenance. So, what about, I can't live without my cheese? That's what Dr. Teeters used to think. For many, life without ice cream or barbecue or something is not really enjoyable. But the thing that they don't realize is that eating a healthy plant-based diet can be very enjoyable. Plant-based food can be really tasty, and sometimes it's just, it's not an endless march of salads and salads and salads. There's a lot of delicious, healthy food that you can eat on a plant-based diet. It just takes a little bit of experimenting and learning. You have to go through that learning curve. So the first thing to understand when making the change is that a plant-based diet is healthy, or can be healthy and delicious. The second thing to remember is that tastes change. In many studies where participants were asked to adopt a plant-based diet, when the study was over, many of the participants continued on that plant-based diet. And the researchers are like, you're done, you can go to McDonald's, go eat your donuts, you can do whatever you want. And the participants who are in the study are like, no way, I feel good, I like this food, I am not going back for anything. The study took them over that learning curve, over that hump, and they are now at the point where they're reaping the benefits. And that can be true for other people as well. I start to hear things when people adopt a plant-based diet after a month or however long it takes. I start to hear things like, I used to hate carrots and now I love them. I don't get it. Why is that? Or things like, you could not have paid me to eat kale before and now it's my favorite food. And in fact, I'm one of those people. Growing up eating ice cream for breakfast every day and never, ever, ever have eaten sweet potatoes or kale or a number of vegetables, never having eaten those foods. I didn't think, when I first started eating healthy whole foods, I didn't really enjoy them a lot. But over the years, my tastes have changed, and now, there's no exaggeration, one of my top 10 foods is steamed kale with a dressing of tahini, lemon juice, fresh garlic over top. I love it. I could eat a big plate of it. If you would have told me that 30 years ago, I would have said, yeah, right, what's kale? Experiments have shown that frequent consumption of a particular food actually changes the taste center in your brain to prefer that food. So the more you eat healthy foods, the more you like healthy foods. So it's really great how God works with us. When we make that decision to eat healthfully, God has put things in our brains that help to eventually make it easier. In addition to tastes changing on their own, I also have a number of tips and tricks in my weight loss program that can actually make learning to like healthy food easier and more enjoyable. Before he changed his diet, Dr. Teeters recalled accompanying his oldest daughter on a Girl Scout trip where they did the rope thing, and he couldn't do it. He said he was exhausted and he just quit because he was too heavy. In the months since, again, he's lost 90 pounds and he feels terrific. And now he's so excited because he can keep up with his kids again and they go kayaking and skiing and do all these fun things. So eating a healthy lifestyle doesn't deprive you. Not eating that ice cream is not depriving. It's enabling. It's energizing. These are the stories that I really, really do love to hear. I want to tell you one story before I close about one of my clients. She came to a class that I taught, and she was diabetic. She was very overweight. She had high blood pressure. She had a number of problems, and this has been a while, so I don't remember exactly all of the health issues, but she was on a lot of medications. I do remember that she couldn't walk anymore, more than just a few steps. It was very painful for her, and she got winded too. And because of this, she really was getting to the point where she was going to have to quit her job. She couldn't work anymore. So her life was very unfulfilling at this time in her life. So she came to one of these classes, and she talked to me afterwards, and she said, I just want to do this, but I don't think I can do this because I just don't like vegetables, and this is totally against anything I've ever heard or done. So I worked with her after the class and showed her ways that she could like vegetables and she could like healthy foods, and showed her the little tips and tricks and the ways to make it easier. And I saw her, and I also told her to consult with her physician, because if she did, so she agreed to make these changes, and then I told her to consult with your physician because he's going to have to change your diabetes medications. So she did that, and she came back to me 2.5 weeks later, I think, and she was beyond excited. She felt better than she said she felt better than she ever felt in her entire life, even when she was a teenager. She had more energy now than she was a teenager, and and she's still overweight, and still had diabetes, and still had high blood pressure, but just the small changes that she had made were so encouraging for her. She felt so much better. She continued on the program, and she lost all the weight that she needed to lose. She didn't just reduce her diabetes medication, she reversed her diabetes. She no longer has diabetes, no medication whatsoever, normal blood pressure, normal, happy, healthy life. So it's amazing what diet can do, and it's amazing to me that God has given us all these things and we're not embracing them. So I want to challenge you today to treat your body like you value it, like the value that it has. Treat it better than you treat your car. Give it the fuel that it needs. Invest in your health, and you will reap huge investments. Let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the good food that you've given us to eat. Help us to be continually moving forward, making changes to become healthier and healthier so we have more energy to live and work for you. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
This program that you have just been watching is available on DVD. You may purchase a copy of this presentation as well as my weight loss DVD by visiting www.autumnleaves.co.nz. That is www.autumnleaves.co.nz. Or you can phone 03-313-7762. Thank you. My name is Jennifer White from jenniferskitchen.com.